Moderator, General Secretary, Commissioners, and friends in Christ. It is my great honor to welcome a groundbreaking and deeply gifted leader on our global Presbyterian family, the Reverend Jihyun, stated clerk of the General Assembly and the executive director of the Interim Unified Agency of the Presbyterian Church of the USA. Reverend O was elected to this historic role at their 226th General Assembly in 2024, becoming the first woman and the first Korean American to lead the Presbyterian Church of the USA in its more than 300-year history. She is only the second woman ever to serve in the denomination's highest ecclesial office. As stated clerk, Reverend O serves as the ecclesial and ecumenical head of communion, offering constitutional, spiritual, and strategic leadership to the PCUSA. And in addition to her role as executive director of the Interim Unified Agency, she is helping guide the denomination through a season of significant organizational transition, building bridges within the church and with global partners. Before this call, Reverend O led the Mid-Council Ministries and previously supported the national call process, equipping ministers, congregations, and councils with discernment tools and system supports. She is also known for her gifts of generative leadership, system theory, intercultural competency, and conflict transformation. Ordained in the presbytery of the tropical Florida and having served in both pastoral and chaplaincy roles, she brings wisdom grounded in experience across many contexts. A lifelong learner, Reverend O holds degrees from MIT Florida International University and the Columbia Theological Seminary, and is fluent in both English and Korean. You can read her full biography in your General Assembly reports, or you're welcome to stop by the ecumenical and interfaith table to certainly review her impressive background. So please join me in warmly welcoming the Reverend Jihyun O.
Thank you. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking to hear one's bio read in a place where nobody knows you, because I feel like it's over-promising people for what you will then hear from me. Thank you for welcoming me to the space. Thank you for this invitation. Thank you, Principal Clerk, and the General Assembly Committee on Ecumenical and Interfaith Relations for this invitation. It has been such an honor and a privilege to be here for the 150th birthday of the Presbyterian Church in Canada, and so I am so glad to be able to celebrate with you. Congratulations, happy birthday. And it's also been really a joy to learn of the transnational Presbyterian connections that we have. There's been a lot of grace that I've received in hearing of God's word that is for all of us, no matter where we are. And I've also been really curious and interested in hearing how the Presbyterian Church in Canada is answering the call to be church in this time and place. Because that is a question that the PCUSA is also trying to answer now. What does it mean to be church in this particular time and place? So I'm going to start off with telling you a little bit about this latest information that's out for us, our 2024 statistics. The 2024 statistics of the PCUSA is based on 82% of our churches reporting, which represents 91% of our membership. The PCUSA is now a denomination of 166 presbyteries and 16 synods. We are a denomination of just over 1 million members, 1,045,848 people, which is down 48,885 from 2023. What that means for us is that if trends continue, then 2025 will be the year that we dip below 1 million members. We are also a denomination of 8,432 congregations and 440 new worshiping communities and new church developments. Out of those congregations, about 70% have less than 100 members on their rolls. About 80% are less than 150 members, and 90% under 300. And when we think about the numbers on the rolls and worshiping numbers, at least in the US, which is that the worshiping number is about half of who's on the rolls, most of our Presbyterians in the PCUSA are in communities that are worshiping 100 or less. Within the denomination, we have 17,700 ministers, that's including all the retired ministers as well, 638 candidates, and last year we had 151 ordinations. Out of that number, ministers, candidates, and ordinations, the ordination number is the only thing that is up. The minister numbers are lower than the previous year. The candidate number is also lower than the previous year. The other number that is up is the number of commissioned ruling elders in our system, to 1,173 commissioned ruling elders. These are ruling elders, so in the PCUSA we use teaching elder and ruling elder language to talk about our parity. And so the ruling elders are those who have been commissioned to moderate a session, to do weddings, be able to do other sort of duties that actually need that sort of commissioning, not to preach, because you can be a ruling elder and still preach. But they are increasingly serving as important congregational leaders within the PCUSA for many of our congregations that are in places and spaces where they will not be able to have an installed minister. I think your equivalent is a settled minister, an installed minister full-time in their congregation anymore. And that number is an addition of 170 commissioned ruling elders from 2023. So a lot of our numbers, except for ordinations, are down in 2024 than they were in 2023. And when we look back to our reunion in 1983 that brought the Southern Church and the Northern Church together to form the PCUSA, we were at 3.5 million members at that point, and we will likely fall under 1 million. What that means is that a lot of our structures are still actually the structures for a 3.5 million member denomination. And what we're doing now and that what we have been doing in some of the years previous to this year, but what we're also continuing now is trying to restructure for a denomination that is 1 million in size or thereabouts. However, there are some places of hope. What we found in the statistics is that almost 3,000 more people asked to join the PCUSA than asked to transfer out. We really believe that that's part of PCUSA Presbyterians trying to be good neighbors in new ways. Instead of asking, who are my neighbors that I should serve, trying to be good neighbors, being faithful witnesses to Christ's love and justice in the world that has made people say, I would love to be a part of that Christian witness. And so the faith communities who are witnessing, renewing their witness and renewing their ministry in their communities, we find are growing. We're also finding that adult baptisms are up continuously since 2021. And we have a net positive in baptisms both at confirmation and for adults in 2024. And what we're finding is that those who are staying within the PCUSA are staying with commitment and conviction, and giving in churches has increased year over year in 2024. So I threw a lot of numbers at you. But there are some places of learning and wondering based on some of this information, the statistics and other things that we're learning at this time. If almost half of all PCUSA members are in congregations of 300 or more members, it's likely that our presbyteries are feeling the effects of decline more than the average person in the pews. And we find that to be true. Our presbyteries are wondering how to support their work, how to resource better their congregations, how to continue to give per capita to the General Assembly agencies to do the work. But I've also wondered if part of what happens when the average person in the pews is attending a congregation of 300 or more, but so many of our churches are actually much smaller and perhaps feeling disconnected from the denomination, the presbytery, the places where discernment and decisions are happening, is whether the decisions and discernment at General Assembly feel off and things like Louisville keeps deciding this, but we don't believe that, or we don't agree with that, or you keep creating policies and asking us to do these things, but we're feeling really disconnected from the decisions of the General Assembly, happen because so many of the majority of our congregations are not feeling represented in the process and not feeling nurtured or encouraged or supported in their living out of their call to be in Christian witness and ministry. And so one of the things that we're thinking about is how to support some of the smaller congregations, the smallest congregations, and even some of those that we might call micro-congregations that are memberships of 25 or less or 50 or less, who may have trouble meeting the requirements of our Book of Order, some of our policy requirements, to see how we might help their Christian witness so that they're not just doing administrative tasks and feeling overwhelmed by that. The other thing that we notice about our statistics is that 59% of our members are 56 or older, and 34% of our members are 71 or older. Now, there's a lot of wisdom in those numbers, and a lot of history and a lot of commitment to the PCUSA. And also, what that means is that as we continue to have an aging denomination, a lot of those generational commitments, awareness, knowledge, and what it means to be PCUSA Presbyterians will likely decrease over time. And this is reflected a little bit in a Pew Research on religious landscape that I'll talk about in a moment. But another wondering that I've had about this particular bit of statistic is when a significant portion of the most involved people in our denomination are in stages of life that focus on questions of legacy and life review. How does that impact our discernment and our decision making, and which direction we're viewing history? And a sort of secondary wondering to that is, how do we ensure that all stages of life and faith are represented in our discernment and decision-making spaces and bodies? So that question gets me to our General Assembly. We have General Assemblies every 2 years since the 216th General Assembly in 2004. And every General Assembly since 2018 has been different. But there are a few things that are consistent. So the first thing that's consistent is that our General Assemblies are every 2 years. It's also part of our rhythm that we have 3 days of very intense committee meetings and then 5 days of plenary for each General Assembly. In addition to the commissioners and advisory delegates who come to every General Assembly, we have about half as many people, or just as many people, who show up as overture advocates, Presbyterian synod leaders and stated clerks and resource persons that make for a pretty fulsome group of people who come. Among our advisory delegates, we have always had young adult advisory delegates, theological student advisory delegates, and up until last year, ecumenical advisory delegates and missionary advisory delegates. One change that will happen in next year's assembly is that our ecumenical advisory delegates and missionary advisory delegates will be combined into partner advisory delegates. But here are some other differences that we've been navigating as we've been rethinking what it means for us to have more voices represented in our decision-making and discernment spaces. And for us to continue to think about what it means to be church in our time. 2018 was our last fully in-person assembly in St. Louis. But that was also where we actually had the Hands and Feet initiative that was started by my predecessor, Reverend Dr. J. Herbert Nelson, who believed that we should not just show up in General Assembly cities and spend money and think that we have made a difference in those communities, that we ought to be doing something impactful and meaningful in terms of Christian witness. And so in St. Louis, we launched the Hands and Feet initiative and engaged in local action around cash bail reform. And Presbyterians gave to a bail fund that was then used to allow a lot of people to come out of jails because they could not pay the bail money in order to keep a job, to attend to their families, to wait for trial dates, and which was, in the US, one of the ways in which economic inequalities and oppression of people of color in particular was continuing to be perpetuated. So since then, we have not been able to repeat a Hands and Feet initiative in other assemblies because of the format, but in Milwaukee next year, we hope that we will be able to do another local action and sort of a witness time for assembly commissioners and advisory delegates and all other participants. 2020, as you might imagine, was a time where we could not have in-person assembly. So between March and June, we converted to a fully online assembly, did abbreviated business because it was required by our Constitution not to skip a General Assembly, and referred most of the business to 2022. So we met fully online, and it was not great. 2022, still in the middle of the pandemic, so we spread out our committee meetings over 2 weeks. We had 16 committees that we divided into 4 different groups that met for 2.5 days each. We switched over and we continued to do all the committee work that way so that no committees overlapped with anybody else in mealtime. We also went to single rooms for the first time, which increased our General Assembly budget by a lot. And other observers were discouraged from coming. And there was a lot of deep sadness that people experienced around that change in General Assembly format. And it was exhausting for General Assembly staff. And we vowed we would never do a 3-week assembly ever again. 2024, last year, we did online assembly. So in 22, we did in-person committees and then online plenary. In 2024, we switched that format to go to online committees and in-person plenary because we heard from people that they wanted to be together, all in the same place, worshiping together, being able to eat together, and to experience what it means to be part of a denomination more broadly. And so we did that. But because we retain the online participation portion in committees, we believe that's one of the reasons why we saw an increase in participation of younger commissioners for the first time. We did an overhaul of our standing rules, including changes to how we do moderator election, which we will put in place for next assembly. But people still felt like something was missing. We had gotten rid of the exhibit hall, and folks missed being able to mill around and have those off-time connections and to get more resourcing. People felt like there was a missing piece about how we actually do the community building and relationship building pieces together. And so in 2026, we will add a community day, and we will also have a person who helps us with data collection to help inform future General Assemblies. To say, was it really because of the online assemblies that we saw a lot more younger people, or was it just a blip in 2024? And as of now, the 2028 Assembly, and there's a Deputy State Clerk, Carrie Rice, who has been with you before, is really excited about the 2028 Assembly being GA228. That is the only time where the numbers will align. He is very, very excited about this. But the current proposal will be that it will be the same format as 24 and 26. We will have online committees and in-person plenary. But PCUSA Presbyterians love to bring overtures of varying kinds, and so we already know that there will be an overture for all in-person assemblies to return starting in 2028, and so we will consider that in 2026, and so this might change next year. Based on our statistics from last year, in 2026, we will have up to 510 commissioners. It seems like a lot, but the question still remains, who is still missing from our General Assembly spaces? What are the issues that we need to address in terms of process and accessibility and representation, all of the things that our General Assembly Committee on Representation attends to? How can we continue to live into our creedal aspiration of listening to voices long silenced? How can we continue to think about generational transfer of leadership and other resources and decision-making authority? And how do we live into our full communion commitments that we've made with PCUSA partners for sharing and decision-making with one another? We've written that into our full communion partnerships, but we still don't know that we haven't figured out how to do that. And the other question, how do we ensure all commissioners and advisory delegates have information they need to make well-informed and well-discerned decisions, especially in light of decreasing knowledge about denomination and what it means to be Presbyterian? And that's where we come to some of the focus of the work that we're trying to do in this time. We're really trying to focus on identity and ecclesial formation issues. What we are hearing from the Pew Religious Landscape Study for 23 and 24 is that even though religious affiliation decline may have leveled off in the US, there is less stickiness to those religious affiliations, and there is less of a shared framework for understanding the stories of our faith, for understanding how we make decisions in a particular framework together. And more people are saying, even those who have religious affiliation, that in moral and ethical decision-making, logic and reasoning is more important than a moral ethical framework suggested by our religious tradition. Our publishing corporation is already thinking about what that means for curriculum development. That we can't assume that people know the stories of the Bible. We can't assume that people know what it means to be Presbyterian or Reformed. And so what does it mean for us to continue to think about ecclesial formation and identity? We've also been, I think, similar to some of the things that you all have been hearing, have a history of seeing pastors as CEO and disinvesting in leadership of ruling elders and deacons. So what does it mean for us to continue to invest in the vocation of discipleship for all the baptized and their discernment to leadership and from baptism to completion of baptism? We're also continuing to think about what it means to be PCUSA Presbyterians. Christian, Reformed, Presbyterian, and PCUSA. We are not just an NGO, we are a church, and so how do we make our statements in a way that a church makes statements and reclaim our religious voice and witness that has been ceded too far to the far right and the Christian nationalist voices in the US? Our theology and our polity matters, especially in the face of rising authoritarianism and populism. And so what are those practices? How do we continue to undergird them with good values? What values need to be reconsidered? And then our policies matter. And some of the policies that we're trying to bring forward at this time are wholeness and peacemaking. Presbyterians do mission and partnership, evangelism, discipleship, and really important for our time and in the context of the US, God alone is Lord of our conscience. One of the things that I did as the state clerk of the General Assembly was to join as a plaintiff a religious liberty lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security for their rescission of the sensitive locations memo that says that ICE enforcement can happen in sacred spaces. We have not actually been a plaintiff to a legal case since the 90s, but this moment felt like it was important for us to join because of the situation in the US. We are able to do that because we have a policy that says God alone is Lord of the conscience. We have relied on that to actually reply to congressional questioning about our socially responsible investing practices and our mission responsibility through investment committee and its work, and the ways in which then our foundation and our Board of Pensions invests our funds. We've used this, again, to join this the lawsuit about the sensitive locations rescission memo. We will continue to look for places where we can join other lawsuits so that we can continue challenging the administration's executive orders and other policies as we continue to reclaim that voice of the church. We are in a time where the church's influence has decreased and our voice is actually not as effective or as sought after as in times past. But we continue to ask that question. What is the new future to which God is calling us? And I hear the parallels in your discernment. What are the places of possibility? And instead of asking ourselves, how will we survive our shrinking resources and our numbers and our dollars and our aging denomination and the burnout that everybody is facing, to instead ask, what are our new possibilities for who we are now and what the world needs now in God, where God is already at work and calling us? And I'm grateful to be in partnership with the Presbyterian Church in Canada and look forward to ways that we might be able to share in ministry in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jihyun, for the presentation. Thank you. I was just going to say thank you very much for sharing with us today, and particularly seeing those parallels as we are facing the challenges of being in the church today and looking for those opportunities for hope and possibility. And certainly that challenge of claiming our identity within the context that we're in. And thank you for demonstrating that today and sharing that with us. And wonderful to have you with us at our 150th. Thank you.